Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do on officehours.global. Our first hour is a general discussion of production and IT-related topics where we answer viewer-submitted questions. The second hour is typically a deeper dive into a topic, and all this week we are doing brainstorming. And what that means is basically we are planning for the year coming up, or at least the quarter coming up, and we're planning our topics. So if you have ideas for topics in the video production and multimedia space and adjacent areas like editing, storytelling, direction, stuff like that, both hardware, software, and on-set people skills. If you have ideas about any of those, put them in the second hour in Mukana today and we will discuss them. So this is your big chance to kind of drive content in the show for the coming quarter. That said, Mitch, let's dive into our regular questions today. So first hour questions, what do we got?
Thank you, Bill. We have a big panel, and therefore we have a lot of people ready to answer these questions. First one in from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. David's also on our panel. Yesterday, a bunch of essential apps showed up in Zoom. Which of these are really essential? Which have you worked with?
Yeah, this is one of these great questions we get the day something comes out. Nobody has much experience with it, I don't think. So anyway, I saw them when I took a look, and it looks really interesting. They've got some apps that are going in there. We've got a couple of people who have a little experience. So David Paskin, start us out of here.
Well, I don't have any experience, but they all showed up. They're just lined up there on the right side of my Zoom. I have no idea what any of them do. I sort of wish if I were to hover over them that I'd get some sort of pop-up. I mean, it tells me the name when I hover over it, but I don't know. I mean, and of course, I also got emails from a couple of the ones that I've been using in the past saying, "Hey, we were just chosen as an essential app. Can you believe it?" So it's an interesting, and I think what most of these apps are doing is they're giving us 1 year free, and then they'll start charging all of us.
Mitch, your thoughts?
A little trouble trying to get rid of it because I didn't want to see it. But at the very bottom on the right, there's ellipses there. And if you can chase it down without it disappearing every time you roll over it, it's like a game. If you click on it, you get a menu that says you can eliminate that or close that particular dock. But it took me a while to figure out how to get to it.
Jesse Kester.
It seems like the app developers were also caught off guard because there are typos in some of the descriptions of the software.
So this is definitely a 1.0 version here. All right, that's all we know about it today. Sorry, David. It's brand new for everybody. I'm sure we'll be talking about it more as the week goes along. Let's head to the next question.
And continuing with Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York, asking, is it ever okay to use the second Thunderbolt port on devices, or should deck links, docks, SSD RAIDs, and audio interfaces be on a separate Thunderbolt input on the Mac Studio?
And you're lucky today because no less a prestigious panelist than Oliver Breidenbach, who's here from MimoLive, is on the panel, and he raised his hand for this. So Oliver, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you. Yeah, so generally, of course, it's better to have the devices a dedicated Thunderbolt bus for each device, but it's no problem to daisy chain them. I've done it a couple of times with displays and capture devices. Usually no problem. You can go into the About This Mac, and there, if you scroll down, there's a button that says System Report, and if you click on that, and there's a category called Thunderbolt. If you click on that, you see how many Thunderbolt channels, how many Thunderbolt devices how many Thunderbolt thingies you have, and you can see what devices are connected to which of them, and just make sure that you balance them out nicely, and you should be good. So,
fair enough. Chris Fenwick has some thoughts too.
I would also recommend, and I've done this, and it's kind of alarming. If you have anything more than just the absolute bare minimum, turn your computer on, balance your checkbook, turn it off, I would recommend that you make a USB/Thunderbolt map of your computer. Map everything that you have plugged in. As Oliver mentioned, you can keep track of what bus it's on. But you can see the things that are daisy chained together. It's very easy as you start adding, a webcam here, a microphone there, a stream deck, whatever. There are certain things that you can, where a certain amount of latency is acceptable. Like I have no problem plugging a stream deck into a hub. I definitely don't want to plug my audio device into a hub. And it allows you to sort of logically figure out that stuff. I have things chained mini devices long, and it's frightening. So that's why I ended up drawing out a map of it.
Fair enough. And Oliver had another thought here. Oliver?
Yeah, it's a good idea to do this, but you actually don't have to do it manually, because you can go into the system report and it will draw out the map for you. So you see exactly what devices are connected to what bus, and even the hierarchy if you have multiple hubs connected to each other. And also I wanted to add that there's now available a couple of Thunderbolt hubs, which is been in the specs from the beginning. And Apple added support to that on Monterey. And now you can buy a Thunderbolt hub and extend the number of Thunderbolt connections you have on your computer, on your Mac. If you have only one Thunderbolt connector or two, you can add a hub and add that, extend that easily to 5 or 6 Thunderbolt connections. And it's important to also distinguish between Thunderbolt and USB-C and USB. They're the same connectors, but they're different things. And if you mix up the devices in the wrong combination, you might end up with some adverse performance problems when you hook up, for example, a Thunderbolt device to a USB-C hub. That's not going to make you very happy.
Is it still the case? I remember on some of the lower end Macs back in the day, particularly the really thin ones, there was 2 ports and they were shared. And if you got into the wrong port, it created some problems. Is that still the case, or does everything get the same bandwidth? Do you know, Oliver?
Well, the Thunderbolt 4 ports, you can check how many buses you have. And there is the possibility that some connectors use the same bus. But that's, Thunderbolt is slightly different from USB. And so it's usually not a problem because it's very, very, very fast. So you don't run into the same kind of issues that you did back in the day. But it's still a good idea to know sort of the tree hierarchy of the devices and make sure that the critical ones get as high up in the hierarchy as possible.
Excellent. All right, Chris Fenwick had another thought. Chris?
So Oliver, you mentioned that you could get the system to draw this out for you. Can you give us a hint as to how to do that?
You go to the Apple menu, and then there you go. Do you have? I only have Ventura now. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it was a little different because if you click on the About This Mac.
You have to go, because there's a couple of extra clicks in there. I can see all of the devices, but you said you could, and maybe you were, you said you could draw
okay.
It's just a list, correct?
It's just a hierarchical list. It's like an outline. So
perfect. Thank you.
But it's the less work you have to do, the better it is, right? So.
Amen to that. Mitch, you had another thought?
Yeah, USB-C and Thunderbolt 4, they look alike, unless they have this on them, the little lightning bolt and a 4. The OWC do that, which is very convenient. And the OWC dock and hub will duplicate the Thunderbolt, as Oliver was suggesting.
Okay, we've talked through this. Let's head to the next question.
Moving on to Douglas Carmichael, Samsung has introduced an AI-based SDR to HDR conversion in their 2023 TV lineup, with features from NFT stores to telehealth added to Samsung's 2023 range. By the way, is LG OLED still the panel's TV preference?
And Courtney Gooden's going to start us off here. Courtney?
Well, I recently had to buy a new TV set, and I looked at the LG OLEDs, and I looked at the Samsungs, and I chose the Samsung over the LG because the QLEDs are able to achieve a higher level of brightness and don't have the burn-in problems of the OLED panels. They seem to have a little bit longer life, and they can get handle HDR in a much higher range, can get a much higher lumens in the highlights. With the mini LED with local dimming and a quantum dot filter and the LCD. So that's what I went with. So I'm not sure what's available. I haven't looked at the announcements coming out of CES today to look at the new offerings from Samsung. Of course, all the latest bells and whistles will be on the new ones, and I can't wait to see what's coming up, but I probably won't be buying another one for a couple of years. So I'm sticking with a 2022 model.
Mitch?
Keep in mind that there's only a few manufacturers of the actual panels, maybe 4 total in the entire world. So a lot of these companies like LG and Sony share the same panels, but their electronics are different. So if we're talking about an AI or other thing, like Sony has a thing called an X1 exponential processor that it does to process the video on it, especially an OLED, which I do, which looks great. I mean, it seems to be doing a good job. I just wonder whether directors at movies like the idea of the TV monkeying with their color grading.
Nigel?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say OLED was my choice. I had an OLED television. I will never do that again because it burnt in. So I would, I know we have individual tastes. I'd probably go with a QLED from Samsung. I would do something like that. And Samsung, interestingly, announced a 77-inch television, which was a new size on me. So it sort of goes 55, 65, 77. And that's where their new TVs are going. So it's an interesting number, but I would be very careful about OLED unless you really want to manage it.
Sky?
And on the budget side, the TCL monitor, I bought mine from Best Buy. It's very sharp, very crisp, and very thrifty.
Tom Ferguson?
My LG C series is only a couple of years old, so I'm not in the market yet. But if you are, you're probably going to have to wait till May or June before these TVs really come out.
All right. I think we've covered that. Next question.
From Paul Buchan in Columbus, Ohio, found the United States Geological Survey LiDAR Explorer yesterday, and I'm curious what all one could do with all that data that's available. Could you do a virtual site survey for outdoor venue? What tools and software would you use to get measurements?
And we've been talking a good little bit about LiDAR here on the show. Alex is very, very kind of forward-looking in that and has a lot of good information for us. And from what I understand, the tools you use and the amount of time you take really has a lot to do with the quality of the results you get out of a LiDAR scan. I know that things are getting better and better, and Alex has been talking recently about additional hardware coming out and additional capabilities of multiple pieces of hardware talking to each other to do even better LiDAR scans. So I'm sure as that happens, site surveys are going to get easier and faster, and you'll get better results from them. But it's a developing technology. And so that's about as much as I can cover. So check back another time. Thank you very much. And let's dive to the next question.
From Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Graham asked, I have a camcorder mounted atop a 20-foot mast. The entire mast rotates to pan on a bearing of 2 nylon discs if it was never going to be as smooth as a fluid head, but would lubrication help, and if so, with what?
Courtney Gooden.
Lubrication might help. I've never heard of a bearing. Well, a bearing with nylon, but maybe the nylon is there to smooth out the pan. And what you might do is look for something. Look for some. I just disappeared. Look for something like this marine lubricant that has Teflon in it. This is available on, of course, our old friend Amazon. It's designed for outdoor and the weather. And if your bearing is mounted outdoor, and the Teflon and the lubricant will slow down and smooth out the pan put a layer of it between the 2 nylon plates, and that could give you a little smoother turn. It won't be able to do quick, rapid pans, but it may make it look a little more like a fluid head.
Oliver.
Yeah, just a quick note. I've used a very high mast as well. But I put a PTZ camera on top of it, and if you use NDI, and that's a very good use of that, You run only one cable up the mast, and you have full control over the camera and a very smooth movement, and you don't have the whole mast to move around, which might be a good alternative to trying to move the whole mast.
That makes sense. Make the pan tilt on the head, not on the mast. I wonder if most of those masts that I've run into have been in ENG vans, and they were there to allow a dish to go up and point at the top of a mountain for signal. They're not really designed to be a camera moving thing. So yeah, that seems like a really good suggestion to me. Next question.
David Brady, New York, asking, is the USB port on the back of the Meta Portal TV usable? Can I hang an external microphone off this port? He's asking for a friend.
David Paskin will help you.
Well, I don't know if I'll help you. There are 3 ports on the back. There's the HDMI, power, and USB-C. I've never used the USB-C. From what I've read, from what I can see, it's primarily used with a dongle to connect it to Ethernet, so you don't have to rely on Wi-Fi. So I don't think it supports audio, but that would be interesting. I have to say, I love this thing. I just used it the other day. I had an event in someone's house. I popped on top of their TV, plugged the HDMI in, and was able to Zoom our thing with no setup. It was just fantastic. It's sad to me that they've discontinued them.
Understood. Next question.
It's from Andy Kuckendorfer in Viera, Florida, asking advice on headphones for music that fit big heads. I tried the Beyer Dynamic DT770 Pro, and they don't fit. Thanks.
Mitchell, help us.
I have a big head, not figuratively and literally, and I use the Sony 7506s. I can't speak to the Beyer, but they seem to be okay. They stretch, which is the important thing.
Yeah, I use the same thing, and I have a relatively large noggin. The 7506 is the thing you want to look for is when you pull down on the earphones, do they have a sliding band? Because that, as it comes down, will allow them to go wider. So if it's a fixed over-the-head thing, you might have problems, but if it's adjustable, you should have a better solution there. Courtney?
Sorry, I was trying to untangle mine so I can do that straight. This is MV6, which has been replaced by the 7506. This is the coveted MV6, but you'll notice one side has an adjustment, so it can adjust for larger noggins like myself. So you pull that down, and it gives you a little broader and looser clamp on your head if you're going to clamp your 2 ears to keep them from falling off your head.
Sky.
And my 7506s are in the next room. The upside of those are that you can also replace the foam comforters. So consequently, you might be able to adjust that as well if you needed to.
All right, next question.
Oliver Breidenbach from Salzburg, Austria, and here on the panel, is anyone on the panel aware of an add-in to PowerPoint that would allow executing an HTTP request to remotely trigger things like lights or layers in MimoLive? I'm currently having one developed, but would love to avoid the investment.
Oh boy, to the best of my knowledge, I've never heard of anybody being able to execute HTTP from a remote kind of trigger inside PowerPoint or Keynote for that matter. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I've never seen anything. So unless anybody else on the panel nods differently, sorry, at this point we don't, Olive. Let's go to the next question.
From Douglas Carmichael asking, with all the advantages of digital first advance, why do you think CES hasn't transitioned to being a digital first show?
Mitch, start us off.
It's a very big show. There's a lot of money involved, and anything that happens is going to be like a big ship at sea. It's going to turn very slowly, but I think we're already seeing the effects of people wanting to go to a digital type format.
Jesse?
If you're a vendor at CES and they go to digital first, the question is, why am I relying on their infrastructure to speak directly to customers that would be excited about my products? And then you start to migrate over to your own platform to do your own keynote speeches. And then the second question is, why am I doing it this weekend when there's so much other noise from so many other companies that are trying to divert attention away from my announcement? And then suddenly you don't have a CES anymore.
Nigel?
I think there are lots of reasons, and it's everything from people like to meet people. If you see the picture of Predo and team, people like to get with people, and that's a great chance to do it. I think if you're a smaller company, you just disappear into the noise, and there's a chance that people walking around the huge booths will bump into you. I think if you're a larger company, you've got dealers and brokers all over the world. It's almost impossible to have a physical communication with all of them. But in a time like CS, you can get to the major ones. You can wine them, you can dine them, you can show how they're important to you. I mean, there are so many things outside the show floor, outside the announcements that happen at CES. My experience with CES was I got stuck in a small office, and every 30 minutes the person I was talking to changed, and I got through 20 or 30 key partners or journalists, which physically would have been impossible to do any other way. And so I think there are lots of benefits outside product announcement and outside the show floor that happen around CES. But if nothing else, as the first person said, this thing has a very long tail on it. And I don't know what the critical mass of number is. I've heard 100,000 went this year. I don't know if it's 75,000 or 50,000. At some point, it won't be economic. But I think we're still way off that.
Liberty?
Totally agree with Nigel's last part. Well, all of what Nigel said, but specifically that last part of like how long it would take to get there. They're probably planning, but also when you think about they've created something that where everybody's gravitating to. I have so many associates and friends that are out there connecting with people. So that's one plane ticket, one hotel room in order for them to connect with all of that. And the value of that, especially for an emerging or a growing business, it is invaluable. So they understand that they've built something that is tremendous and can provide the product announcements and all of that. So for them to make that shift, it will take a little while, but there's still so much tremendous value for the in-person aspect of it.
Courtney?
Yeah, I don't see it going away. The digital first they'll use for product announcements the week before CES so that they can command a little bit of notoriety on the internet before everybody arrives in Vegas. And it's that one-to-one networking that you get in the main event, the in-person event, that you will never duplicate in a digital first situation, because you have in a digital first, it's mainly everyone attending other than the exhibitors is passively listening to what the exhibitors are putting out, and you can't really communicate with them on a one-to-one basis. I find that at the trade shows, one thing I used to love doing is seeing a new product and finding the product manager and giving him my ideas on what would make the product better before the product comes out. And you actually have a chance of influencing features on a product that has yet to be released that they're showing at that show. And you would never have the chance to do that at a digital first event.
Tom Ferguson.
And finally, I can't imagine being impressed with a 97-inch monitor looking at my 27-inch monitor. Being there in person makes a big difference.
Yeah, my comment on all this is that also I was surprised to find that the trade show cycle also used to affect product development cycles in a bunch of ways. Everybody knew that a big show was coming up, so all the developers would be working for a year, maybe 2 years or 3 years in product development, but they would have a target. NAB week is when we're going to be showing this off. And even companies like Apple, who famously withdrew from the show, used that show cycle to introduce new things. So at NAB, we would see a new rev of the software or some new major announcement. So if all of that goes away and everything becomes digital first, what will be the places that we all know that the industry is going to be looking in this category? And you'll have more focus, more energy, and more eyeballs on this area of the technological world as opposed to every other weekend. So I think there's going to be some version of it that'll keep going. But yeah, it's definitely changing. And I completely agree with the thing that making the press release announcement maybe a week before and then letting everybody gather to kick the tires and ask questions might be a really good way to approach this. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, what does the panel think about audience audio augmentation tools at live concerts like Mix Halo or Peaks?
I don't know specifically what they do with that, but audience audio augmentation sounds a little bit like good front of house mixing. Maybe they're talking about something else, and maybe that. But live concerts have always had this process of needing the energy of the live performance and trying to communicate that to the audience watching at home or on their pads or whatever. So if they're doing if these products, which I am sadly not familiar with Mix Halo or PEEX. Interesting. I'm not familiar with them, but if they can manage to bring more of that live experience into it, maybe they'll find a market for it. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace from Austin, Texas has a question. Apart from office hours, which has the best show coverage? What is the best way to experience CES via a roving walk-around report?
So everybody has their own way of doing it. I've spent so much of my life going to trade shows like NAB and CES and the rest of these, that I have a personal strategy, and this is just me, so other people have a different way. But what I used to do is, first and foremost, I would sit down with the show brochure. There's almost always a brochure, and it gives you a map of the show floor. That is all digital now, but you can still find it online. And I would plot out, just circle in pen in my hotel room, the must-sees. Then I would look at those and say, what are my routes through the convention to get to those? And I would specifically look for areas of small vendors that were on my way that I could divert to, because often the most interesting things I found at a show were not from the big announcements, but from little up-and-coming companies that had something that could solve a problem for me. So for me, it was that balance. I want to see the big things, but I very much want to find those little targets of opportunity booths along the way that could seriously solve a problem for me. So that was my balance every year I went to trade shows for 2 decades. David Paskin has thoughts.
Well, I have more of a question than thoughts. I'm wondering, I've never been to CES. Is the audience changing for these trade shows? That is to say, before the pandemic and before all of us were thinking about digital first coverage or digital coverage of any sort for these events, the audience was the people who were showing up, who are on the ground. So are these shows thinking about a shift in audience? Is the new audience or a new segment of the audience now the folks who aren't showing up and are watching from home?
It was definitely starting to change. At NAB traditionally, and that's just one of the bigger ones that I went to many years, it was a commercial show. You'd see people in suits, and you wouldn't see the public as much because it started on Monday, went Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then it was over. Just this last year, when they tried to kind of reboot NAB, they moved a part of it to Sunday. So they were obviously saying, consumers, everybody is interested in this stuff now. Let's readjust this formula to make it more consumer friendly or general attendee friendly, rather than just industry insider. So I think that was happening. Liberty, your thoughts?
I would say, I'm looking at what Paul was saying, like he was specifically saying the best online coverage. I haven't seen anyone this year yet. I know they just started. I've seen Engadget doing some reports, but for me, the best virtual CES experience that I had was 4 or 5 years ago, where they streamed on Twitter and they engaged. They had influencers that were hosting like each day, I believe it was, like they had different influencers. So that way we got the behind the scenes from the influencers, so you could like follow their feeds. And I think this kind of follows some things that Alex has mentioned in before of, going deep into the personality and that's more TV show programming. But I see that as anyone who's going to excel in their content and coverage of CES is that you've got the comments coming in from the audience. You're pulling in, you've sprinkled like breadcrumbs of content in advance, and then you're engaging with them live while you're there. And then the planning part, as you said, Bill, the brochure and putting like that plan of production together. So I think that to make a CES broadcast or live broadcast engaging, it has to include some social elements, social and interactive elements.
I think you're exactly spot on with that. In terms of curation, my path through NAB or one of these shows would have been different than a friend of mine who was heavily influenced by audio or was interested in teleprompting or whatever. So curators, people who are hosts of digital first content, who can bring you into the part of the show that is most interesting to you, makes perfect sense to me as we move toward digital first. Sky Gleason?
Historically, these conventions were out of my reach. And so I would make friends with the vendors and or the resellers themselves. And consequently, they were more than happy to give me their input about their product and how it was going to solve my problems. But yes, once I started attending NABs, it was the relationships, and consequently not just with fellow editors, but with the vendors and the people that were supplying the equipment that I needed to make a living. Now, I also, to the question, Paul, how long do we think this could last? Well, there was a big show called Comdex. At one time, had a lot of people that would attend because they were all trying to understand computers. As laptops and things were evolving into personal computers became much more of a commodity. So I think as a commodity concept, Paul, you may be on the cutting edge there with South by Southwest. We maybe start seeing more vendors showing up for festivals because that's where people are gathered. And to Jesse's point earlier, the clients, people are there to sell something, and they need people, so they're going to go where the people are.
Courtney.
As far as who has the best coverage, sitting back in my easy chair, thumbing through YouTube last night, I find that CNET has some pretty good coverage, and Gadget does too. If you're looking across the YouTube channels, I kind of like Lon Seibin. He has a YouTube channel that deals with hardware and software, and he's scouring the show. And I did see his roundup of the preview shows like PepCom that they have last night before the show opened today. And he does a very concise report. He edits it together very tightly. His personality doesn't get in the way of getting information out. I'm talking to you, Brian Tong. And it's a good way to get a lot of information fairly fast. And he cuts all the chaff out and just goes for the facts and cuts from booth to booth to show you what he's found and what's important about it. And the prices, he always manages to get the prices out of people. So that's important. And when looking at new products.
Hey, Courtney, I didn't catch that name. So did you say Lon? If someone wanted to look it
Lon
up.
Seibin. Lon Seibin.
Is it Cybin or something like that?
CSIBESIEBEN, I think.
Okay.
Lon Seibin. He's got a YouTube channel.
All right, fair enough. Nigel.
Yeah, CES isn't one show, it's many shows. And so what I try and do is think about what the vertical I'm interested in. So I will go, for instance, the home automation stuff is interesting. I'll go to CE Pro, which is the sort of home automation trade press, and I'll start there. So my advice is you've got to pick the right show because there are multiple different shows. I would always walk around the car a technology thing. I wasn't in that business, but I wanted to have my whole body shaken by the bass that I could hear from a mile away. But so go to the vertical for the particular industry you're interested in.
Yeah, I think that resonates with me too. I spent a lot of years, and somebody said, "Did you see that great thing in NAB?" And I went, "No, I never got over there. There was so much to see that without knowing where you're going, you'll miss a lot." Next question.
From Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia, asking, "Hello, Oliver. Does MimoLive work with the video pencil by Michael Forrest?"
Oliver.
Oh, yes, it does. As I can just demonstrate here. So I just downloaded it and just draw on my face here, which is nice. And
wow.
It's something I will certainly add to our add-ons tools list, which is very easy to set up. It sends out the video using NDI. So it sends out a transparent alpha channeled video. So if you draw on the screen, I can really just drop in a new layer in MimoLive and just turn it on and it works. So it's a very cool thing.
Excellent. MimoLive compatible with Video Pencil. David Paskin.
And Oliver, are you, does the MimoLive send NDI, the program out to the iPad via NDI so that you can see what you're drawing on?
You can do that. Yes,
Right.
You can do that.
Nice. All right. This is great to have the developer here so we get absolute answers. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Can you shade and fully control a Blackmagic Ursa or the Broadcast G2 on the ATEM switchers? If not, can that be done by the higher-end 4K TV studio?
And this is another one where I'm unfortunately, I'm trying to remember what Alex has said about those because I think he works with both of those pieces of technologies. But if I tried to give you any kind of semblance of an answer, I would probably get it totally wrong. So sorry, we're going to miss on this one. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, will we ever see direct SRT in and out support in MimoLive without the use of FFMPEG?
Let me think. Who could answer that on the panel? Oh, Oliver.
It's, it's my destiny to answer those questions, I guess. We'll never say never, so I don't know. I hope we get around doing it sometime. It certainly is an interesting thing. I think it's very complicated setup, and from my point of view, it's a little overrated in form, in terms of what SRT can do. A lot of people are very excited about it. I'm not so excited about it. So but we get some requests to that effect, and we can do input through FFmpeg, which I think works quite well. Output is not yet implemented with FFmpeg, but we'll do that as well. So because FFmpeg just offers a lot of opportunities for output, and so that's going to happen. I don't know if we do native. I've looked at the SRT SDK a couple of times. It doesn't seem to be very straightforward to be implemented, not as straightforward as, for example, NDI or Blackmagic SDK. And so that always means a lot of work. And we already have a lot of ideas. We have to allot, the resources to the things that makes a lot of sense. SRT is on the list, but I can't make any promises.
All right, that's fair answer. Next question.
Nigel DeSound, Austin, Texas, asking, I received emails today about a class action settlement around Apple Butterfly keyboards. Have you ever responded to one of these, and do you think it's worth the effort?
Liberty.
I have, from a big box retailer, and I got all of $7.13.
I resemble that remark. Sky.
I was, involved with a class action suit of some kind. And yes, I think I was a checkbox on some legal assistant's to-do list. And so did I get any money back? I don't know, but I'm sure they spent a lot more in mail and postage than I would have ever received had I followed through.
Courtney.
Unless you're one of the original claimants on the suit, class action suits that you participate in are never going to return you anything more than maybe a coupon for $10 off on the next product you buy, from them, from whoever created the problem.
Nigel.
Thank you for the advice. Sadly, I've received 4 of these emails, which tells you how much money I've spent on Apple Butterfly keyboards in the last few years.
Yeah, I think the people who really make money out of that tend to be the law firms that bring the class action suit, not usually the people in the class, but that's just me. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, with the growth of open consumer-centric home automation standards like Matter, what places will the old line vendors like Crestron and Savant take in the residential technology industry?
There's the name I was looking for. Nigel, talk to us about what you see.
I'm sorry, I missed that one. So the answer is the bottom of the market will continue to consumerize. The top of the market will still stay where it is. If you're doing, we did a wired house the other day with last couple of years ago, 196 shades and 90 televisions. You're not going to operate that on Matter. You're going to need something more fulfilling. So large homes are still going to use these things. Small homes, more and more people do it themselves.
196 automated shades. That's a lot of window. Cool. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, at CES, TVs are going wireless, even a 97-inch LG, and some are battery-powered. See my note in chat from CNET. How will these get used, and is there a whole new market category?
David Paskin.
I don't get it. This is not a portable consumer device that I need to not have plugged in. I just don't get it.
Remember when you'd see a teenager walking down the street with a wagon with a gigantic boombox on it? Maybe we're coming into the era where their little iPod will be running a 60-inch TV on a cart behind them. Who knows? Sky.
Well, I've started noticing, since we're no longer connected by a cable, I think these portable monitors can be put in venues and places around office buildings, but they're not just TVs anymore, they're monitors. So just think of where you would want digital signage. So I could imagine this being used for other things than just entertainment.
Sky Gleason. Oh, that was Sky. I'm sorry. Courtney
Sky.
Gooden. Yeah, I know.
Well, the main application, I think the main application for these is for RVs and for, pool TVs, things that you have outside that is not close, not easy to get wires to. Now, the battery power, maybe 12 volt powered, so you could power it off an RV power system, or 12 volt battery might be a good idea. Because I see a lot of RVs in the film industry. A lot of the RVs, the trucks, the catering trucks have 55-inch TVs on the outside to entertain people to put their digital signage up. So 12 volt systems are fairly common, but battery powered, I don't see it.
Oliver.
Yeah, I think removing wires is a good thing. So if you're looking for a solution to put something up temporarily for maybe an event or something, you just roll in the thing with the battery and you can just cast to it. So I'm fairly amazed at how low latency something like the Apple TV is when you do AirPlay to it. And I think, I'm a big fan of NDI because it removes wires, and so I can see uses for that. I don't think I would put something like that in my living room and then have to worry about recharging it anytime or every time. And I think if I have a stationary monitor somewhere and there's all the electronics in it for making it, wireless, like the battery, that's just additional cost, and the battery is just gonna die over the years. Because if I don't use it, then I don't need to have it. But I definitely see use cases for completely wireless displays. And I would agree that you have to think about this not in terms of a TV set, but of a monitor where you can just display anything you want.
Jesse Kessler.
I didn't think I wanted 20-minute batteries in my studio lights until I had studio lights with 20-minute batteries, and we started doing all of our pre-lighting on battery. Then we would plug it into wall power. So we didn't have to deal with any cables when we're doing the early stages of lighting. And then we can nudge it once we're plugged into the wall after the 20 minutes of pre-lighting. I can see plenty of uses for small monitors, just like this in video production, where you want the first half hour very loose and mobile. And then once you're kind of settled in, then you plug everything in and kind of settle down a bit.
I wonder since I'm not able to go to CES this year, I'm wondering about the security of all these wireless TVs. Is it possible for somebody to either hack into it or vampire off your signal if you're in an apartment complex or something like that and grab your purchase of some movie? Interesting. Something to look into. I haven't really paid much attention to wireless TV yet, so something for the future. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael asking, the conventional wisdom is that a second monitor is essential streaming equipment. With large-size ultra-wide monitors available today, is that still true? I know some Mac OS applications do not like being window capture, though.
David Paskin will start us off.
I've worked with a couple people who have these ultra-wide monitors, and I've only had problems with them. I'm a fan of having lots of little monitors. And that way I can put everything full screen, each on its own little monitor. I'm pretty sure that there are ways to segment monitors, these ultra-wide monitors, that I'm just not smart enough to figure out yet. But my limited experience in working with folks who have them is that they're really challenging to work with.
Mitchell Hill.
I agree with what David has to say. Also, if you're using a teleprompter and a camera, FX3 Sony in my case, you need a place to put it in the middle. And until they make an ultra-wide monitor with an FX3 in it, I'm not going to go there.
Oliver?
I have an ultra-wide monitor and I simply love it, but I would still say that a second monitor is preferred because it just gives you a defined area where you don't accidentally show stuff that you don't want to show. window capture is on the Mac is not a very good idea. Apple has updated the API a little bit, so it might be better if we use the new API. But screen capture is much more reliable and doesn't put that much load on the machine. I even go so far as to say, if you are doing a presentation, so if you run something like PowerPoint, then you should actually have a second computer, not just a second monitor to run your PowerPoint presentation on, because if you run it full screen with the speaker view, it turns all the monitors black, so you don't even have you don't see the speaker panel in Zoom anymore and things like that. So running it on a second computer is offloading all the loads. You get smooth animations, you get smooth video playback. And you can basically use it the same way as you would if you perform on a stage. So there's a lot of advantages using a dedicated presentation computer and a separate streaming computer, which is what I recommend for professional setups.
Jesse.
Just to echo what's been said, for me, it's more about information delineation than it is pixel count. So multiple monitors is usually better than one giant monitor.
Yeah, what Oliver said resonated with me. When I used to do presentations that had to work, I would always bring two computers, and the content would run off of one and the presentation would run off the other. And boy, in this era with inexpensive ATEM switchers and like that, it's really easy to be able to pop back and forth between two sources. Let's move on to the next question. And by the way, we're going to probably be starting a little bit early on our brainstorm. We've got a couple more questions, but not many. So if we need to, that's what we'll do. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace, Austin, Texas, asking, Sony announced Ophelia at CES, a new car with 45 cameras and sensors with movies, games, and a lot of other stuff, including Unreal Engine for social mobility. It's available in 25. Is this a game changer?
Nigel, start us off.
No. So listen, let's be honest about electric cars. It's very simple. If you travel less than 50, 100 miles a day, doesn't matter which one you buy, they're fine. Pick the one with the best go faster stripes you like. If you travel much more than that, in the US at least, the only question that matters is it a Tesla? Because you need access to the Tesla supercharger network. None of the other charging networks work. What the game changer in electric cars will be when they consistently do 500 miles on a charge. And then I think stuff will change. But really, where things are, they can make them look as pretty as they want. But if you can't charge them, it doesn't make any difference.
Mitchell.
Yeah, Ibo, the Sony robot dog, needs a car to ride in, so I think it would be a good investment.
John Preto.
I don't Ophelia, Sony. This is what I thought about their presentation last night.
Ooh, ouch. We got a verbal or an audio response. Courtney.
Yeah, I watched the presentation, and it's in conjunction with Honda, who's building the car, and Sony is taking their PlayStation, electronics and processors and putting them in the car. I don't think gamifying driving is a good idea, because most of the driving programs that are out there as games, have you crashing into stuff and robbing people and driving like a maniac. So I don't think 55 cameras, it may be the dream for the insurance adjusters and the insurance companies out there if it's recording all 55 of these cameras when you're cutting somebody off in the freeway and creating its 25 car pileup. But other than that, I don't really see the utility other than the safety aspect.
Sky.
As a Leaf owner, I'm at the Nissan dealership, and a woman is very excited about her brand new Nissan Leaf and having traded in a Tesla, because she says she's old school enough that she didn't want to be touching a screen to turn her lights on and off and her windshield wipers up and down. She needed more tactile buttons. So the gamification of something for somebody and the automation may not be quite there yet, but that was an interesting response to the latest technology and people needing transportation.
Tom Ferguson.
Oh my, is Sony going to find a way to institute a subscription service to my car?
Possible. I'm wondering, cars seem to be in flux now. I mentioned the other day on the show that I was, Carmi Weinsfeld and Guy Cochran and I had lunch in Oceanside a couple of days ago, and he brought his hydrogen-powered car, and it was really interesting to be in something that was completely different in a category that is not electric, but is still trying to figure out how to kind of revamp the whole driving thing. Now, this isn't self-driving. This is standard, a car that you drive and the rest of that. I'm wondering, with all those cameras, what's the point? And if it's not road awareness leading us towards self-driving, I'm actually now getting a little bit more technology interested in the alternate technologies of power rather than just the AI aspects of it. But we'll see. It seems like there's just a lot of development going on in the auto space, and it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out over the next few years. Nigel, do you have a last thought?
Yeah, the cameras is for self-driving and for awareness of the vehicle. I did want to point out that the games are not while you drive, they are while you parked. And while you are stuck at your charger charging, you can turn your machine into a games machine. I can watch Hulu, I can watch YouTube, I can watch Netflix on it. But when you do that, it turns off the driving capability.
Yeah, so that was the thing I was interested in with the hydrogen, because it's more like the fill up at the tank. It doesn't take very long to fill it up, so you avoid that. I have to sit here for a half an hour or 45 minutes, which is an issue. So I guess I can see the gamification of the car in terms of giving you something to do during that. But interesting. Let's move on. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has a question. With the prevalence of large-size, ultra-wide computer monitors, would the use of a TV as a desktop monitor not be advised today?
Oliver, what are your thoughts?
I would generally not advise using a TV set as a monitor, because they do all kinds of processing on the video signal, and you might want to have a monitor that is specific for just showing what the computer wants to show to you. Especially if you do video work, you don't want the monitor to color correct your Final Cut Pro video material, or AI interpolate from 24 frames to 120 or whatever you have. Makes it look nice if you watch a 4K Netflix show, which is heavily compressed, and so they do some magic to it to remove compression artifacts and stuff. But if you work on the material, you don't want this stuff. So get a good dedicated a monitor dedicated to video work, or if you're doing office, if you use it for gaming, then you're probably okay, because the display is just fine for that, but not for working workstation.
Courtney.
If you're not doing color grading, a 4K TV can be found for pretty cheap, and most of them do have the ability to turn off have a game mode, what's called game mode, where it turns off all the processing. So if you're worried about latency or the effect of interpolation on your video that you're playing back to test, but it actually is a good thing if you're editing video to have at least one of the monitors to be a TV monitor, so you can see what it's going to look like on a consumer panel. So a lot of times, it's like having the small monitors, near field monitors in a mixing stage, so that you hear what it's going to sound like when it comes out of a transistor radio, So I think there's applications, and it's much cheaper. Typical a 43-inch computer monitor is going to cost twice what a 43-inch TV does, simply because the commoditization of the panels sold throughout a larger market makes the TV priced a lot lower.
Liberty.
And just as another side to thinking of like making sure that you have a color accurate, if you're doing video, a color accurate monitor, because I actually ran into, and actually with someone on office hours, asked a question like almost 2 years ago about a monitor, and I had to pick up and do some color grading for a project. And the original monitor I was looking at it on, when I looked on the color graded one, which is bigger, that the color was off. So just putting that as an example of what you want to be mindful of like, yes, if you get a larger television screen, that's fine, but just the color accuracy, depending on what you're using it for. So just as an FYI.
Those things all resonate with me, as does the fact that one of the things I've been looking for a new TV because I have one in my living room that's about to be too old. And I thought, I just want really a monitor. I don't want all the fancy stuff. Boy, finding a TV these days without Netflix and Hulu and 35 other built-in processors in the computer in the background. And I've been reading some stuff. And, when you're watching those TVs, it's possible the TV is also watching you in terms of tracking all the places that you go online and the rest of that. And I'm a little leery of that. So trying to find something that is more monitor and less TV for a household situation is a goal that I have. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to achieve that goal because I understand that some of those auxiliary uses actually support the TV manufacturers with revenue streams. And that's part of what keeps some classes of TVs so surprisingly cheap for the size of them. So it's just something I'm thinking about as I'm back in the market again. Courtney, you had another thought?
Yeah. If you are using a TV as strictly as a computer monitor, don't connect it to the internet. Don't set up the Wi-Fi. Don't plug an Ethernet cable into it, and you won't have any problem with it spying on you or using its little applications to slow things down or doing automatic updates, any of that stuff.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's weird that you have to pay. Well, I guess you're not paying it. I guess it's subsidizing it. It's buying a TVs is more complex than it seemingly used to be for me since I'm out in the market. Next question.
Next one in from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. Will Nick Justitian be the first to get an Alfila from Sony and Honda so we can go on the road with Unreal Engine?
He'd be a good choice, I would think. Nick, our dear friend who is at Drexel University and is one of the research folks who is paying attention to Unreal Engine at a very deep level. Well, next time he's back on the show, somebody definitely put a question in there and see if there's any connection between what's happening with Unreal development and what's just happened with the Sony Honda initiative. Next question.
Next one in from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. My workstation has grown a bit out of control over the past 3 years, and the key factor keeping me from rebuilding it is cable management. What tricks and tools do you recommend to get this mess under control?
It is a mess, and it's one of the most complicated subjects we deal with here because computer cabling is not getting smarter. We think all this Wi-Fi stuff will make it easy. There's still a lot of cables off the back of everything I own. Oliver, what are your thoughts?
Well, just do it. I mean, that's usually my strategy is just plug apart everything every now and then rewire it. And then I need a cable, and then I grab that cable out of the thing, and it gets disorganized again. So it's just a periodic, thing to clean up, and it's a psychological, it frees up a lot of feelings. Just do it.
Mitchell.
Chad, it's time for spring cleaning. You got to pull all this stuff out there. I'll tell you what I use, and it works great. It's a basket, a wire basket with holes in it, like you would call a laundry basket maybe, that's made specifically to hang onto your desk on the rear edge. And you can just lay cables in there and have them in and out at any point. I find that a very useful organizing tool, especially on your monitors.
Courtney.
And once you lay out your equipment with whatever cables you have, then go out and measure how long the cable could be if it just went from point A to point B, and buy cables that are the right length. And that way it gets rid of all that excess cable that you don't know what to do with and looped up behind everything and becoming a spaghetti mess. So,
Sky Gleason.
Yeah, it sounds like you're trying to fly the airplane and build it at the same time, and also service your clients. So that's a challenge. So you might need to build a second airplane first, like a temporary workstation, so that you can completely deconstruct your main location. And again, in working inside of big locations, I've seen the cable channels. Again, they're all very intentional about. They know they're going to pull more cable. They're going to take some cables out. So they're putting flexibility in intentionally. And also, again, my challenge for me is I always shove my desk up against the wall and then I'm crawling underneath the desk. So if there's a way to pull your cabling back or your desk away from the wall and give yourself that inevitability, you are going to need to get back there at some point. So think for the future proofing.
Yeah, I'm going to plus one on that. I had one of my computer desks in the middle of the room, and it was glorious to be able to just go to the back of it anytime I wanted to. Also, some of the higher end computer furniture have what are called cable troughs built into the actual desk. If you can get a hold of one, and then either on the new or used market, they are very much what Mitch was talking about, but these are metal troughs, not wire baskets, and they have multiple cutouts so you can get cables in and out of them. It just gets to be a difficulty. I remember there were years when I used zip ties, and then I just realized that every time I put a zip tie on anything, I would cut it off within 2 weeks because I had forgotten to add something or take something out, and it became a mess. So I moved to doing all Velcro wraps and things that are changeable, because change is inevitable in the systems that we work with. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. Bill, that was interesting that you said that 2 computers can be useful for some presentation use cases for music audio workflows with some streaming. Would 2 Mac Minis be better than 1 studio?
Well, I was talking mostly about on the road. That's where I found it the most useful. If you are going to be traveling, and it's exactly what Oliver was talking about earlier. If you have a single computer trying to perform 2 functions, which is play out for the audience and running your presentation through Keynote or something else, for me, it was always, even with as good as things like Keynote are at giving you a preview of the slide that's coming next, to know that when I hit a button on the ATEM or whatever mixer or switch I was using in the old days, this signal that's on this computer, when I hit this, it will go to the audience screen, no questions, nothing to configure, nothing to crash, I found really helpful. I think it's a little different in your home system. And some of those things like the built-in Keynote function of program and preview being on the software can work just fine. But that's my thoughts. Jesse Kester and Oliver will give us their ideas. Jesse?
As with most things, it really depends on what you're going to be doing with it. If you're going to be producing music, I would go with the beefiest, most robust computer, single unit computer that you can get. But if you're getting into streaming and you do want to do graphics, I would seriously consider having a computer dedicated for the graphics and feeding that into an ATEM. And the reality is that when we're servicing a client, if we are planning on 2 computers, one for streaming broadcast and one for playing graphics, we bring 4 computers.
Double up. Safety is always best. Oliver, your last thought here.
Yeah, the specific use case that Douglas mentions, I would recommend. I would say that yes, 2 Mac Minis is better than 1 Mac Studio, because the audio apps really you don't want them to run on the same machine as anything else. If you do stream your work, then you might want to separate those things. The Mac Minis are certainly very powerful, and 2 of them are maybe on par with Mac Studio. Depends on what Mac Studio you use, but having 2 separate computers doing their stuff is always a little better than, if you don't have to interact with both things to have to interact with each other. If it's separate tasks, then 2 computers may be preferable.
All right. We've made it to the top of the hour here. In fact, we're a couple of minutes over. Sorry about that. And now we're going to be talking about brainstorming. All this week, we have been talking here at Office Hours about brainstorming for the shows coming up in the quarter. And by the way, I've gotten the note that I'm a little out of sync, and I apologize for that, but it's just something that happens, I think, during these rainstorms around here. Anyway, as to the brainstorming videos, what we do not want to do here is just ask general questions about topics. We want to really get your ideas about what you'd like to see us cover here at Office Hours over the first quarter. And today, since Thursday is traditionally kind of our video multimedia, we deal with a lot of things having to do with content production. We talk about hardware, software, even on-set people skills. So this is a pretty broad surrounding video production area. And so your ideas about things to explore there. So if any of the panelists, we're going to open up for panelists first. If Mitch has already raised his hand, but if anybody else on the panel wants to toss in their ideas about some areas to explore in Office Hours shows coming up in the first quarter, this is the time when you can put in your input. So Mitch, you want to start us off?
Love to bring Charles in to do color grading and developing LUTs, because all of us want to look as good as Liberty's video does right now.
Charles is fabulous. And I, having hosted him a couple of times in the video hour, yes, I'll get a definite plus there. We'll make sure to reach out to him. And he's got a very busy schedule, so I don't want to impede with that. But if anytime we can get him, it's great to have him here. And I know he's already very popular. Liberty, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity because early on, like, as you mentioned, this being like the content day. So I think this is a great opportunity to like the video aspect, the technical side. I see some of the questions that are coming in, which are fantastic around roles and people. So really flushing that out more, terminology, hopefully even getting in some guests that work on certain shows, or even a lot more of the behind the scenes people that make this part of the industry really work. I think that seeing those kind of shows and those kind of interviews would be great, especially for people who are making the transition into this industry. Yeah, those are my few cents.
Absolutely. One of the hardest things about this industry has traditionally been just learning about it. It was really hard to get on sets. It was really hard to meet somebody who was a gaffer or who was an A1 or any of the roles on set that have been classically defined. And how do you know that you might want to do that if you can't even talk to somebody who's ever done it? So yeah, plus one on all that.
To add to that, you make a really great point, because sets are also, they range. So you could have a set that has like only a handful of people. So how do you scale? And for people who are looking for those kind of jobs, to your point right there, what's the path? Because it is a very who you know type of space. So just adding that cherry on top.
Yeah, Alex has always done an excellent job of talking about the etiquette of on set. So even if you have the skills and get an opportunity, knowing those soft back end skills of how to fit into a crew and be noticed for the right things rather than the wrong things, we do, I think, a good job of that when we talk about these, and I'm sure people want to hear more. Sky, your thoughts?
What I'm appreciating about this week is that we're looking at these techniques in each of these disciplines of audio video production, and we're recognizing that not all video is created the same, and consequently we're actually looking at the horses for courses comment about what tool is right for what job. And consequently, I've learned early on, was video is a team sport, and then consequently, who are the humans that are going to what's the wetware that you need to get and manage those tools. So that's what I'm appreciating about this week, and that we're looking at not just like you said, it used to be very expensive. The equipment was very limited, and your access consequently was also very limited. Now, everybody with an iPhone, everybody with a YouTube channel is now a producer, director, writer, the Scorsese, and the manufacturers want you to believe that because they want to keep selling you more service or product. So that's where I appreciate this week is helping us delineate and define inside the video category, what is the best tool for the job?
Courtney, your thoughts?
I think a good second hour on post-production with a kind of a shootout between the major four players in this field, Adobe, Apple, Avid, and Blackmagic with Resolve, to see how they've evolved, who's kept up with technology, who's leading edge, bleeding edge, which ones are the best for which applications, for prosumer, consumer, professional, each of those categories. It'd be interesting to have a representative who cuts daily on each one of those platforms to offer, their opinions.
All right, Jesse.
I know the program's most natural state is discussing live production, streaming productions, things like that. But I wonder if there is more room for discussions on single camera narrative filmmaking, both feature and television, things like documentary filmmaking, something a little more, I don't want to say Hollywood, but you know what I mean when I'm saying that.
I do. And there is a difference. And, this whole thing is flipped upside down. In my career, over the course of the time, you couldn't get a hold of a serious camera unless you were involved in a pretty big production. You flash forward 20 years and everybody has a 4K camera in their back pocket. Now, obviously, that and a Mitchell BMC, which is the very first film camera I worked with, or a really high-level D600 Sony or something like that, those were really hard to get a hold of. I mean, you're talking $30, $40, $50, $60,000 back at a time when that was serious. Most people made $20, $30, $40,000 a year back in those days, a standard job. So it represented a huge reach to even play, and that is all flipped around. And so dealing with, I think that a lot of topics around that area of what's the right path now if you want to learn to do this stuff and advance your career. What are the new gotchas? Mitch, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, my business partner also works at a big rental house in Philadelphia, and he has his hands on every camera that's out there, Aries, Sony, Venice's, everything, and he's a master of lenses. I'd love to talk to him for a second hour about what to look for when you're renting, things that you shouldn't do when you're returning them, all of that. There's such a rich warehouse of information that's happening there because he's got firsthand knowledge of it.
Yeah, I don't think any of us in the early era who came up and ended up with our own operations didn't make friends with our local rental house or two, and they were a deeply important partner in getting us to the next level, because that was the way you got your hands on something that was way unaffordable for you in your regular work. Tom Ferguson.
I was thinking a second hour on special effects. They used to be heavily optical in the film days, but with digital, we've moved into the editing realm. Love to learn more.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. There are, everybody has plugins now, and some of those plugins make easier things that took large crews of optical processing people and machines in the old days. And now you can click on something and get a swarm of particles to emit from the end of a blaster in your home movie. And the distance between what they used to be able to do at Lucasfilm and what you can do on your desktop, I mean, it's not the same, certainly, but it's way closer. Mitch?
Yeah, I could do a whole second hour on Mocha Pro, which is a great rotoscoping tracking software that you can use in After Effects and Resolve and other programs. It's great.
Good. Let's put it on the vote list. And that's one of the things we're trying to do here. We're trying to capture all these ideas, and particularly from you, all of you who are producers who are watching today. So let's dive into the list. Mitch, who have we got?
First one in from Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona, and right here on our panel, bring back Adam Tao and have a mix effect lab.
Mitch.
Adam's the reason I'm here. He was the one that got me to join Office Hours, so I have a special affinity to this. But I have his product, and to be honest with you, I think I only use a tiny portion of everything that's available because Mix Effect is sort of a Swiss Army knife for your ATEM. And I sure like to know the things that I'm not doing that I could be doing that would be very interesting. Adam knows it inside and out, obviously.
Tom Ferguson.
Well, that's just it. The other night on After Hours, we were talking about a chroma key in a particular area, and they needed to do a garbage mask. And how do you do this on Mix Effect? Yeah, it would be great to have him back.
We all love Adam. So anytime he has time and wants to come back, I would hope we can schedule him as quickly as possible. Next question.
Jeff Cohen, Miami Beach, asking OBS. I'm thinking a primer similar to Liberty White's demo and Q&A for Canva would also be a great lab to go from beginner to advanced user.
Liberty has some thoughts. Liberty?
Yes. What I like about this question so much is that even though many of us work very in a professional setting, and sometimes OBS is not something that we want to use because it's failed on us, there are so many people who use OBS. So I think that there's an opportunity to learn something, learn some hacks. There could be some specific use cases around it. Like, so totally unpacking it from the novice and don't know anything about OBS to the hacks to the advanced. Dan Flores has been on this show before, a good friend, and he uses OBS and does magic with it. And I'm just like, how, Dan? So I think there's definitely some opportunities for that.
Okay, vote in there. Next question.
Next question from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington, and it's here serving on our panel today. Can we have guests in to discuss different editorial styles, short form, long form, action, comedy, drama?
Sky, expand.
Well, again, I come from Los Angeles, where the tool is creating the product, and the product is story, and you sell the story to sell other products. Now I moved to Seattle, and the tool is now selling the software, the airplane, the coffee beans, whatever. So I guess what I discovered, though, is to Jesse's point, there's story and narrative in doing both of those. Sale of a product or an idea or a thought. And so that's where I'd be very interested in learning from others that are using story to get an idea across.
And with things like ChatGPT, we're seeing some pressure on story and writing and AI, and it'll be interesting, I think, to explore where that goes, and maybe our Thursdays will be a good source for that. Courtney, you had thoughts?
Yeah, that was my thought, Bill, is the AI application to the editing process. Because once you teach the AI, what is a two-shot, what is a single, what is an over-the-shoulder, what is a cowboy, what is a wide shot, etc., it can now you can now just describe the shots. And a lot of times, writers, when they write screenplays, will incorporate the size of the shot or the close, what the camera sees in the description, in the scene description. So it'd be very possible to have ChatGPT or some other AI actually read the scene description, read the original script, and generate a cut version that complies with the original author's ideas.
It'd be interesting to do that as an experiment and then see how editors or people who write for a living, what they point out in terms of successes or failures and how the AI approach the thought. All interesting things. Liberty, you had another thought? Oops, you're muted.
Yeah, I realized that after, sorry. I was wondering if along this video conversation, if like the narratives for like casters and esports, or how the streaming side of that video, just thinking of like many of them make content on YouTube. So if because there's an art to that as well. So just throwing that out there as like, does that fall in line as well?
I think it absolutely does. And it's really fascinating to me. Nobody who is a skilled, trained writer would ever have written Yoda's dialogue. Somebody had to come up with this idiom of it's flipped, it's different, but it's charming, and it is linked to one of the wisest characters in the canon of that show, and yet technically it's not right, at least to our ears. Will an AI ever get to the point of being able to create that kind of tension, or is it always going to go back and follow the rules? And is that good or bad? These are interesting questions. Sky?
Well, and maybe writers are going to be fitting into this category as well, because I remember listening to James Cameron talk about he, as a writer, had to keep himself from being technically, he needed to be technically inept, because he wanted his imagination to flow. How it was going to be imaged and created, he didn't want to have to be constrained by that in his imagination. So that means we got lots of very interesting and unique imagery from him, because his imagination wasn't limited to the technology. So maybe we need to bring writers into this category.
Yeah. When does the AI heuristics, whatever the programmer put in there, when does it constrain rather than advance? Or does it do both? Interesting. Next suggestion here.
Suggestion from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. HDR WCG streaming. I would love a deeper dive on this topic.
I guess so would I, because I'm not sure what the WCG means about it. It must be a part of HDR, and I am ignorant of that. So yes, I need to be informed. I need to have my ignorance suppressed, and office hours is one of the great ignorance suppressors that I've ever run into. So hopefully we can get that on the list, and somebody will be interested in it. Next question. Next suggestion.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia here. Is there a chance for a MimoLive Ecamm VMix conversation on where these products are in 2023?
Somebody should be able to help us, who is lurking on the panel here, about some of the things about MimoLive. Oliver, do you want to weigh in on this, or do you want to just let it slide by?
No, I'm happy to come on the show every now and then and talk about new stuff. I'm also planning to do a lab for the after hours
Excellent.
this year. But I need a co-conspirator for this because I'm not very good at teaching, so I need someone who's able to teach this stuff. And so, yeah, if someone wants to do that, just let me know.
I smell opportunity. Liberty, you have thought? Whoops, you're muted.
I'm sorry. That's what happens when I'm a panelist today and my mute, having to turn it on and off. There was a challenge show. Now I want to say that was in 2021, where it was putting up StreamYard against Restream. So I think some of those types of things could be interesting to just see. Picking a specific aspect of the technology and seeing how they compare, and having people who use them completely and, in completely different ways. David Paskin is a Ecamm person, and, how that, and maybe some of his future use cases for it. So yes, we've done things like that in a different way before. So it could be great to bring something like that back.
Oliver, your thoughts?
Yeah, I love those challenges. So if you have challenges for me, then just throw them my way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Let's go to the next question.
John Filer from Greenfield, Massachusetts. I think regular business meetings with less than 10 people could be a great topic. Most people seem to lose interest if it's too complicated or technical. Is anyone interested in small conversations rather than productions?
Jesse Kessler.
I think this is the most important lift of 2023, is improving the quality of smaller online meetings.
I think there's a lot of resonance for that. Liberty, you were nodding.
Yes, and I turned my mute off this time. And then when I saw that question, I also thought of, well, there are some higher, investor meetings and things like that, where they're not necessarily large. They are typically anywhere maybe under 30, 20, even 10 people in the room. And that there's an opportunity there to help people who do that kind of create that kind of content. And I think that, there's a big opportunity there.
Sky.
Well, what's the phrase? The tide rises and we all get to go up with it. So the thing, I'm in keeping with the theme here, we're trying to brainstorm for the future. I think this feels like one of the lab opportunities that we're talking about. And so in with regards to video, maybe there are labs or after hours sessions with specific people in specific categories.
Courtney.
Yeah, second hour on the best use of Zoom or Teams or Cisco, any of the streaming collaboration platforms that are out there, and which one is best, and which one, how to work with the tools within each of those applications without getting into too much hardware that interfaces to it, like we are doing here with switchers and back end and people doing remote mixing and so on. Just using the tools that are available to everybody who appears on these collaboration platforms.
Jesse?
And a specific hour that we could do on that topic is how to parlay the compliment that I'm assuming a lot of us get when we enter into a Zoom meeting into a nudge that everybody else move in that direction, because I haven't figured out how to do that without sounding condescending and insulting. So I think there's always, every meeting I jump into, there's this wonderful opportunity to help people improve their setup. And if we could nail that dismount every time, I think we'd see a lot of improvement.
Yeah, we've been talking about that here since the show has been alive. The process of encouraging people to take this medium, online, web-based, one-to-many or group programming, and elevate the whole thing so that it becomes a more acceptable form of public discourse. We've all been working on that for a long time, and I think everybody resonates with that. Liberty, your thought?
Something that came out of Monday's session and in after hours was the idea too of making sure catering to the international audience. I wonder, with this topic, are there some nuances or cultural aspects for smaller meetings, or, as Courtney shared, some tools that we might not typically speak about, the other collaboration software that it might be more so used on the other side of the world. So just wondering if there are the opportunities for us to even dive into that part of it as well.
That's an excellent point. I think most of us who are here come from the NTSC world, and we forget that PAL and Ecamm exists out in the world. There are a lot of people who do not use the same systems we do. Some of them work the same, but when we're talking about chasing 30 frames a second, that is not talking to people who live in areas where they don't deal with that. So yeah, I think I try to keep myself aware of, every time I give out a price, I just try to make sure I'm specific about it's in US dollars, because I realize that not everybody works in that. And the more we can do to help people understand the global nature of our communication system, which is this show, and the global nature of our audience, the better we serve our audience. So that's a very good point to bring up. Let's go to the next suggestion.
Suggestion from Jonas Dautel in Stuttgart, Germany: how to build an HDR SDR pipeline and what to consider in building it.
Yeah, that gets increasingly important, I think, as we go on, because boy, the development of HDR and SDR and the devices, including phones and things like that can work in those different spaces, is certainly a continuing part of our industry sky.
I'm just putting my hand up for the ubiquitous they that it is taking that, and our secretary that's taking notes, Josh. But I second this, and I think Jonas would be has a lot of experience with this, so maybe he would be willing to help participate in that
would be
idea.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, on the list. Next suggestion.
Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri: I'd love to learn more about using FFMPEG as a diagnostic tool, as well as for encoding and streaming.
Courtney.
Yeah, FFmpeg is the engine that runs a lot of encoders and decoders. It's been a command line interface forever, and a lot of people have written a graphical UI front end for it. But it's very deep and very capable, and I think it's open source now. So it would be interesting to me too to explore the nooks and crannies of FFmpeg to do the undiscovered tricks that it can do.
Yeah, and those open source projects, there are huge communities that work on them, and that means that they are constantly evolving. The best part of that is that even if some new codec comes out, that robust community of people working on the underlying technology means you'll probably won't have to wait too long before it accommodates the new stuff too, as the H.264 or 65, 67, whatever's coming changes. You won't have to wait too long. The downside is that, and it's not a big downside, but things are changing all the time. So if you get something that's set up and you have a workflow that's particular and uses this as a tool, you may get to the point where suddenly you have to wait a little bit for it to catch up. I've been in both circumstances, but it certainly is an underpinning technology to a lot of what people do in video and things like that. So I think it's a beautifully worthy topic. Let's move to the next question.
Next topic from Bob Sturdivant in San Antonio, Texas: how about a discussion on making a video project of the roles played by office hours with follow-on projects covering training and proper onboarding procedures?
Sky.
I love the idea of doing a project together, because that way you get to know each other. And I've had the great fortune of volunteering and participating with humans around the world. And it's just been a tremendous community building and self-fulfilling encouragement. I am concerned about the specific of training, doing videos about onboarding, because I stumbled across the founder of Midjourney, and he was doing a online thing yesterday, and his comment was he hates to make too many rules because they're pivoting and changing so rapidly. And even he made the point about making laws that they're going to change in 3 months. And so consequently, I love the idea of doing videos together. I'm not sure where and how we can best support our community in getting the information. So that's my thoughts. Love
Liberty.
that idea.
Oh, excuse me, Liberty.
So I read this as like, say, when NAM or any of these projects, or even our backend team right now, almost as like a spotlight where they might come on and talk through their roles. We can ask questions and learn from them. You know, folks like a JJ, who he's out there and he does this, but he does so much in the community as well. And there being an opportunity for him just walking through training and shadowing. So almost like monthly or quarterly, certain roles that, especially roles that we want to fill in the community, and dedicating an episode or a show to that. That's how I read it.
Yeah, I will note that Alex just articulated, was it on one of these, it may have been on Monday, that he's open to the idea of making some sort of little compensation thing so that people who create training can get something out of it. I will say that my experiences with the Office Hours band, which have been fabulous and so fulfilling, and I've loved doing that. But there have been times when you just go, I can't spend the time it takes to work at the level I want on something that I'm getting no compensation for whatsoever. My wife and my family and my business require time, and I never want to make that too much. But in the future, there may be ways. I just, trying to get professional work in training and proper onboarding procedures. People are doing the work and then having them document and create content that talks about how to do the work at the same time you're doing the work can be an awfully big burden. So I hope, as Alex continues to figure out how to get people involved and keep them involved, that we can get more and more of these things done. It just, right now, we're all on a volunteer basis and everybody has to protect their livelihoods as well. Next question.
And here he is, Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, suggesting Jonas Dautel on the state of Raspberry Pi and other such devices and play out.
Courtney.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because software players which Jonas, of course, has with Playout B that runs on both the Mac and the PC and on the Raspberry Pi, is an interesting topic, whether you could use it within your current computer that's running Zoom, et cetera, to play out on a second screen or a third screen with just perhaps some hotkey controls, so you don't have to look at the screen or click on the mouse to do something to play it out. Or it interfaces like Playout B does to the ATEM switcher itself, so when you switch to something, it starts the playout. That's a very handy feature to have. And so any kind of second hour on software development in the use of video playout to incorporate all the features that we need and to do that in a show.
Let's see. Was there anybody else on there? Sorry, I was doing. There we go. No, next suggestion.
Suggestion from Jeff Keithley in Texas. How about more structured behind the scenes of events we can share so more people can see how it's done?
Sky.
I'd love that. And Jeff, I'd be happy to work with you on that. Again, the question is, each show has a video component, audio component, and a connection component. So maybe that's the base structure. But again, is it a big show? Is it a small show? Is it a live show? Is it a hybrid show? So those are, again, the categories of that. I think that'd be a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I think, this has been a remarkable place in that I've never been someplace else that produces content that is so open to letting people see how the content is produced. We have after hours, we have an open call for people who want to come in and examine the back end and be a part of it and learn how it works. And so the seeing how it done, there are lots of opportunities already. I hope they continue. And, just follow the pathway, start off on Discord and get in the Discord and ask about opportunities. And you will find people all the time going, we can use more volunteers to do this and that. But structured behind the scenes stuff, I think Alex has always been 100% behind that idea. And I think we will see more of them in the coming years. Next suggestion. Oh, Courtney, do you have a last thought on that?
I was just going to think, even if we don't create any behind the scenes stuff ourselves, but just to get the panel together and to make a list of great behind the scenes documentaries that we've seen on the making of films, et cetera. I watched the behind the scenes of Pinocchio, Guillermo del Toro's, which was fascinating for stop motion animation. And so if we could get together and list the ones that we've seen so that we could kind of generate a viewing list of great behind the scenes stuff.
Courtney? Was this? Oh, wait, I think that's the one.
That was me.
Yeah, sorry, it just popped up for me. So I think a little confusion. All right, next suggestion.
Jesse Mills, San Francisco Bay Area, would like to hear from others who are system designers and builders of the modern AV production systems. Topics could include video over IP, control, automation, hybrid, video conferencing. Happy to offer my time.
Jesse, thank you. And be careful, you've raised your hand, and people around here tend to see that and go, yes, please come in and do it. So you're on the list now, Liberty.
I'm going to get this by the end of the show. This is a great suggestion. And I wonder, too, if parts of it also go into like Friday, the logistics side and pulling that together. So it probably could tow both lines. But I would love to dive deeper into that logistics part as well.
Yeah, I think everybody here, no matter which niche we came out of for our training, the fact that we are now involved in a digital show on the web, there's been so much to learn. And all the things you're talking about, AV production systems, video over IP, control automation, I've had to go from zero to at least understanding the language of them in all those areas. It's been fun. But that's part of what the show does. So, yeah, I definitely support that. Next suggestion.
Next suggestion from Jeff Caithley in Texas. Demo of AI-assisted camera tracking. I know a guy that can help.
And we know Jeff. So, Jeff, somebody, hopefully it has been now written down on the official list of topics to consider. And let's see where it goes from there. So, good suggestion. Next suggestion.
Next suggestion in from Tom Ferguson, Phoenix, Arizona. Steadicams, gimbals, sliders. Oh, my.
We've talked about camera movement in more than a few shows, but yeah, it's always fun to do, visual examples of what the difference is, where they work, where they don't work. It's been interesting to me to see that for a while, we talked about cranes and things like that, but cranes have been at least somewhat supplanted by drones and other kind of flyable platforms. There's still a place for both of them in the world, but when is that? If you've got a strong wind, maybe the large scale jib is a better tool than a drone, but maybe in a lot of cases you can get by with a drone where you needed a really expensive rental jib. So things are changing out there. Jesse, your thoughts?
We're seeing several questions throughout this conversation that point to, like, there's an underpinning to them that while the show is built around these really clean shots that are locked into a very clean frame, a lot of these suggestions feel like they're built around 3-camera coverage of demonstrations and also perhaps even pre-produced materials that plays back at the top of an hour or something like that. It feels like this is unpacking a whole nother box, but it feels like that there might be room for a conversation about not ground up format changes, but other ways we can approach the entire program to accommodate the requests for things like behind the scenes coverage of something that might not be happening during office hours. Gimbals, Steadicam workshops need to leave this shot, but there might be room for something like that, and hopefully room for that conversation.
Absolutely. Courtney?
Yeah, second hour on moving camera and how to move it in a non-annoying way, I would appreciate. We could do a comparison of optical image stabilization versus electronic image stabilization with more and more cameras getting higher resolution sensors. It's a lot easier to do electronic image stabilization in things like GoPros, little tiny cameras that don't have room for a lot of electromechanical devices inside there. So it is, and it has gotten quite good. Image stabilization, electronic image stabilization has come a very long way, and it's getting smarter and smarter all along.
Tom Ferguson.
And even alternatives to some of these suggestions, like the Steadicam and so forth. I saw a guy do a demo on a one wheel with a long pole, and he actually zoomed the camera or actually stuck the camera right through the open windows in a car. And it was an amazing shot.
There you go. Mitchell?
And to Courtney's point, it'd be cool to learn the language on set. If you're in a film set, how do they describe what the moves are and what they're doing, like camera moves in, or give me a Mickey Rooney, or whatever the nomenclature. It'd be kind of fun to learn.
Yeah, and nothing shows you up as somebody who hasn't been on a set very much than not understanding that a particular move is called a particular thing. So, if you truck right and you don't know what that is, and it kind of diminishes your cred on a set. So, yeah, I believe all of that. Let's go on to the next suggestion.
John Filer from Greenville, Massachusetts, asking anyone interested in covering training videos like screencast or just shadowing a worker with a phone.
Liberty White.
Training videos. I was trying to find a statistic, and the only one that I saw was like it's a $20 billion industry of like training employees, HR. Thinking about, we've done some work with companies that work for construction sites for safety and just thinking about health. And so that could be broken down into like the styles of training videos. There are so many content creators that when I watch them, I'm like, oh, I like that technique that they've used. So even like all the way from the content creator style tools and how they do it, all the way to actually training from for larger organizations. And that also encompasses, VR and that part of the conversation as well. So there's so many different ways that could take place. And then even what makes a great training video, like just keeping it really simple. So there are different ways that we can take that kind of show and concept.
That's where I came from. Sky?
Well, and I'm finding that Jesse and I are very, attracted to the narrative and the documentary and the cinematic. But the other day, I'm helping my son build something when he's tough shed, and I just wanted the information. And I didn't need a big 30-minute cinematic. I just needed to know where to put the nail.
Yeah, but those things are changing too. It's interesting. When I did the Final Cut training for here, one of our largest discussions was how to chapterize or point to individual packets of content so that in the respect of a 45-minute training program, how do you let somebody who's coming in get to the piece of that content that they want to access? Because they don't want to see the opening. They don't want to see the close. They don't want to see the other 100 topics that you covered.
Just where do you put the nail? They
want this topic. And there is a process that exists on the web and through tagging and things like that allow you to do that now that we could never do when I was doing that kind of training content in the corporate
the equipment
world.
Has been, the price of equipment, the ability, and also unfortunately, my son was saying in trying to build this shed concept, he was overwhelmed with too much information. So good and clean, accurate information is a part of the writing, as a part of the content. And as you say, if you can't find it, it's worthless. So the notating,
and it needs to be searchable. So you've got to have some kind of a system where you can do a text prompt and say,
we're getting off the topic, but these are refinements of what I'd like to see in a second hour.
Yeah. Okay, good. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking a deep dive into MimoLive and integrating it into a larger production pipelines.
Oliver's going to help us.
That's going to be a very deep dive. So I've done that in the past on After Hours and or the predecessor to that. And I always find that there's so many topics that I could discuss that I'm very, what should I do? So if you want to have specific things, then that would certainly help if people could submit specific show use cases that they want to dive into. I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, next question.
Jeff Keithley from Texas. Demo of real robotic camera setups and the differences between those and pan tilt zooms. And again, he knows some people.
Courtney.
That would be great because motion control cameras are used in visual effects all the time. And it is an art unto itself, programming a camera so that it can repeat the same move over and over 100 times, right down to a fraction of a millimeter is pretty amazing. So yeah, having an expert on to discuss that and how it's used and how it can be used to incorporate special visual effects with multiple passes is interesting.
Absolutely. And that thing I was trying to think of is actually under the heading of content searchability. So if Josh is still back there listening, put that down on the list and see if anybody else is interested in voting it up. Next idea.
Next idea coming in from Douglas Carmichael, building audience engagement and how to keep it.
There you go. That's always, you produce this stuff. You need to engage with the audience because there's nothing worse than doing a lot of work putting out there and nobody's interested. So good topic, Douglas. Let's go to the next one.
Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona, and right here, which lens is the right one for the job?
Boy, there's a lot of work to be done there because there's so many lenses that can be used on to create content these days. Mitchell, what are your thoughts?
As I said earlier, my friend who works over at a rental shop, he knows lenses. And the better part is he actually has them. So if you need a set of Cook primes worth about $300,000-$400,000, he can open them up and show you exactly what they are and what they do.
Courtney.
Yeah, this is becoming less of a problem with computational photography because there's so much stuff that they can do after the light goes through the lens to the image that it bears, it's less important these days than it has been in the past. But however, starting with the right lens is an important topic, I suppose.
Next area.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. Wirecast. I use it daily with great success, but hardly hear of it on office hours. I would like to dive deeper.
Duly noted. Again, with all of these, we're gonna put them into the mix. The individual areas, the people who are in charge of content for different day parts and things like that, we'll all put them into the mix. I think we also put a lot of these into Discord. And I don't know if there's a specific coming up, but that's another place where you can kind of self-vote for this topic should be important. And I know Alex pays a lot of attention to that part of Discord. So remember to not just articulate it here, and that's great, and we're glad you're doing that, but also reflect it, if you really want to see it, reflect it into Discord so there's a more permanent listing of it. So next area.
John Filer from Greenville, Massachusetts. I was just hired full-time to manage the facilities of a makerspace. I'd be happy to volunteer to help do some making hours here or in after hours if the community is interested.
Makerspace, those areas where I think people can go in and get access to 3D printers and things like that. So that would be really exciting. And I know we've talked about that a good little bit. Jesse?
This is one of those forest from the trees things that is extremely exciting. Like we all know makerspaces exist. People who work at makerspaces know they exist. But getting more eyes on the fact that you can basically have anything you've ever wanted in your entire life fabricated with extremely high quality. I think this could be a very, very exciting second hour regularly throughout the year.
Oliver?
Yeah, we actually built a lot of live streaming equipment with 3D printers now. So we've done, little control devices for cameras and things like that.
Yeah, it's a burgeoning industry. I was getting to the point where I was thinking that at some point houseware stores will just disappear and you will go in and set your pattern and then pick them up at the makerspace where some huge 3D printer just prints out exactly what you want. It'll eliminate a lot of costs in terms of shipping things around the world. So interesting topic. I think that's definitely in our wheelhouse. Let's go on to the next one.
Tom Ferguson from Phoenix, Arizona, selecting the right camera for the job.
Mitchell?
I know a guy. He's a DP and he could do it.
Jesse?
This feels like it's tethered to the picking the right lens for the job, and the thought I had on that one was we don't always have to be forward looking. We can go back and talk about still photography from 50 years ago and have a little bit of fun in that arena too.
Sky?
I think this should be the question that's asked of every topic, and rather than, because I'm very giddy about the shiny new thing, and that's often where I get chased into. And this reminds me of the DP that does not own a camera because he wants to use the right tool to tell the story the right way, rather than selling the camera.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. Why 8K? Consumer electronic vendors are pushing 8K, but is 8K relevant for production? And will clients demand 8K?
Mitch, can you grab that for a second? I just lost a screen here. It must be something still in the lines coming into the house.
No problem. I got it. Jesse,
thanks.
You're up.
Just thinking about that, the 8K and will clients need it? Second hour is discussing how to introduce clients to technical specifications without them glazing over within 2 minutes would also be useful, I believe.
Yeah, and it's funny, the whole subject of 8K is how much of it is marketing push and how much is practical. I noticed that with 4K. It really was slow in coming, and then it came fast. So when people are looking for 8K these days, it looks like it's on the horizon or on the radar screen, but not quite there yet. And the other thing is not a lot of cameras can make 8K as far as the high-end cameras go. Courtney.
Yeah, it's largely marketing at the current time, and a look at whether or not it's even practical would be a good second hour. You know, once you look at the bandwidth required to shoot, store, edit, and transmit 8K, it may not be practical if you analyze all of those elements in the pipeline to deliver such a high resolution signal.
Yeah,
Mitch, thanks. I got panel feedback.
Go ahead.
So, no problem at all. So those are the two for that. Are we heading to the next question?
Sure. Sky Gleason from Seattle asking, where does visual storytelling fit into the video for an office hours second hour? Can we talk about DPs and directors about visual image capturing for storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely can talk about it. Sky?
Well, we've kind of glanced over this, and I didn't realize Jesse was a brother from another mother. So that the concept of being too excited about the visual, sometimes you don't need words to tell a story. And so to tell an entire story that you can understand without and it's its own language. So I'd love to have more people help me understand the language of visual arts.
Courtney?
This might be a better after hours topic, because doing it on a live YouTube stream is difficult without showing examples of how visual camera moves, framing, etc. Adds to storytelling without showing great examples. And I'm afraid we'd get into a lot of copyright strikes if we showed a lot of great examples from movies or television. So
yeah,
maybe after hours would be better.
Yeah, it could be. I will say that it's interesting when you've been around movie making or content creation for a lot, and you start to realize that it needs to be written in the script, because if not, then the idea doesn't exist. But when it comes time to execute the script, your thought of, I need a camera here panning to the right there to show this. Sometimes dialogue can be done by the presenter or actor with a look or a movement or something. And sometimes I have found, we can cut these whole lines out of that and just have them be able to see the next step, rather than in the script, we had to describe the next step in language. And that is part of the magic of movie making. I've seen directors in the field go, we don't need any of this dialogue. Just show each other you love them, and there's no reason to tell them.
So
and
maybe both maybe to Courtney's point, so we don't get, hung up on lawsuits. But
well, those soft skills of content creation, where it's not all, some people are process oriented and they focus on trying to do the script exactly as the script is written. A lot of times, really good content crafters start with a script and then find better ways, more shorthand ways, more impactful ways to do it than just going by the structure of the script. It's an interesting topic. I find it interesting whether or not other people do, or whether we can show that is a fair discussion. Let's move on to the next one.
John Filer, Greenfield, Massachusetts, asking, how about covering brainstorming with icons on a slide deck? Maybe collaborative brainstorming on shared Google Slides with real-time feedback.
Yeah, brainstorming is an interesting thing. I've been hired a couple of times to go into corporate circumstances and be part of a panel just because I think weirdly, and I think they thought he'll bring in something that nobody else will. Brainstorming is an interesting. It's in part about assembling the group. If you've ever been a focus group, it's really interesting to see how different people approach the same problem. So brainstorming, I think, is an interesting area. So it's on the list now. Next question.
Robert Green from Los Angeles, California. Are there many of these suggestions leading to some sort of office hours field trip or more after hours labs?
Mitchell, take us away.
I think it's very likely both are true. I mean, there are situations where showing something that's going on somewhere else, not necessarily taking everybody to a location, and certainly the doing a lab is very complimentary, as Courtney was mentioning earlier. So I think it would certainly work well.
Yeah, remember, we were born in the pandemic where nobody could go anywhere, and it's great seeing these circumstances where we get to see other people. I, though, agree with what Alex has articulated, which is that it limits the number of people who can get up and go someplace, always limits the people who can be directly involved in any let's go here and do this thing. I've tremendously loved the time we could do that, like with the rocket launches and things like that. And I've had a great time. But for every person who gets to be involved, there's probably 25 people who can't find the circumstance to get to a location to do that. So I think it's always going to be more. But yeah, why not? Next. Oh, Sky, did you have something to say?
As a freelancer, I got to go into lots of other people's facilities, and no two were the same. And consequently, I thought these were the humans that knew how to, and they'd fixed all of the problems, and they were just working with the equipment they had and the engineering and the talent they had for the clients they were serving. And so I love this idea of, and that's kind of what we're doing virtually, but to do it in person, maybe there's a yes and.
Okay, next question.
Bob Sturdivant from San Antonio, Texas. His comment is, how about a guest speaker to show editing? Found This Guy Edits on YouTube and found it very informative.
Yeah, Courtney?
Yeah, maybe we could get that guy who edits to participate in our shootout between editorial platforms.
I know that guy, and I will ping him and see if he's interested in working with us. Great guy, Los Angeles editor, and I won't mention his name so nobody. But anyway, yeah, he has a fine channel. If you haven't seen This Guy Edit, he talks about, he sits in a chair with scenes in front of him and explains his thinking about pacing, the juxtaposition of scenes, why something's missing there, and what he thinks needs to be done, and then he actually does it. It's a great, Sven's a nice guy, and yeah, we'll figure that out. Jesse?
It feels like this program is built around welcoming guests on it, and I'm wondering what the impediment. It seems like there would naturally be at least 3 guests a week of, like that kind of guest that you're describing, This Guy Edits. And I'm wondering what's keeping that from happening. Is that there's nobody, there's no producer who's working on booking guests? Because it feels like such a natural fit.
It is, and it's not that. Alex has been cautious about turning this into a complicated show of expectations of all these guests and things like that until the back end was locked down and we knew what we were doing. And we had enough crew, quality, and everything else so that as the show gets more popular and gets presented to more and more people, we're locked down on the process. I think he's always been heading here to higher profile, more guest-oriented, and more expertise-oriented. But I just think he did that slowly. These are my opinions. I can't speak for him, surely, but that's what it's felt like of being on the inside of listening to how this thing has grown over the course of the last 2.5 years. So I think we'll get there. Next question.
Next topic from Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona. Video editing, a second hour of tips and techniques to this professional art. Even better, a follow-up lab.
Tom Ferguson doesn't have it. Let's see. Oh, okay. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Sorry about that. A window got in the way. Mitch Hill.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I'm a little reluctant to support a shootout because a shootout has negative connotations to it. It's almost religion too, because an avid editor may look down their nose at a premier editor, and they all have their high points and low points. It's better to just put it out there as a separate segment for Premiere and Final Cut, etc. Rather than have these guys shooting it out with each other. It's not sort of office hours attitude.
Point taken. Next question. Tom Ferguson.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about a shootout. I was talking about more of the techniques that they use, J-cuts and other types of interesting techniques to make the video more interesting.
Absolutely. Jesse Kessler.
And not a shootout approach, but each of these tools has something unique about them. And to do a second hour on what you can only get when you're cutting in Final Cut Pro X, or what you can only get in DaVinci Resolve, could be very interesting. Not a competitive thing, but just like what's the little turnkey in this piece of software?
Well, that does make some sense. What are the strengths? Maybe do 20 minutes of the strengths of each as a presentation on, if you're cutting in this, a fine editor who knows what he's doing or she's doing or they're doing, will approach it this way. And on this tool, a different editor using a different tool will approach it a different way, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that'd be interesting. Courtney?
Yeah, in the shootout, I mean, basically to determine which application is best for which market, what's best for cutting TV, what's best for cutting corporate, what's best for cutting YouTube videos, what's best for, cutting each individual type of product.
Yeah, that does. Well, so on the list, let's move on to the next topic.
Douglas Carmichael, making the most of your phone for shooting on the fly.
Jesse Kessler has a thought.
We don't just need to keep it to shooting on the fly. We can also talk about integrating your phone into a production pipeline.
Sky Gleason.
A gentleman here in Seattle referred to the iPhone, or shoot with the phone that you have in your, or the camera that you have in your hand. If it happens to be a phone, use it.
Yeah, Courtney.
Yeah, a whole second hour on how to turn your phone horizontally.
And then you'll find out they're shooting for a in-store display that is vertical itself. Oliver.
Yeah, I was about to say, or get used to the fact that there is portrait video out there.
Yeah, this has been tough. I mean, there was almost a religious divide of never, ever, 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 ever under any circumstances shoot vertical. And I've seen a lot of people bend that attitude because there's just so many use cases for video now. And I mention that because I used to do a lot of work for major malls in my area. And a lot of them outside of, Forever 21 have a vertical display. And I was suddenly asked to make content. Even 10, 15 years ago, I was asked to produce vertical video specifically for that signage. And it was a good, nice, lucrative market for a while. Jesse.
About that, a lot of clients have been asking us to shoot, to be ready to post horizontally and vertically, and I think a second hour on how to approach a physical production that's going out into radically different formats would be valuable.
Yeah, I did one of our early video shows on one of my earlier Thursdays. I addressed some of that, but I agree with you. It is more complex. There are more outlets for things. And there are different sensors now where, protecting for the center square so that you have an equivalent image in horizontal and vertical that you could pull out of that makes you a little psychotic as a shooter because you're constantly flipping back and forth. And I don't want to put everything dead center in every frame, but that means that I have to think, does it work here? And does it work wide? Does it work tall? Does it work wide? And I found that challenging as someone operating the capture device. Let's move on to the next one, but that's good topic.
Paul Terry Wallace from Austin, Texas, Q Sensitive Music. Courtney talking about his life story in Austin and Hollywood as it relates to video and the teleprompter.
You want to do a life story so we can go back to who was the guy, Edward R. Murrow, who did This Is Your Life? It was somebody. I can't remember.
It was Ralph Edwards. Yeah.
Ralph Edwards. This is
I
your
think
life.
Maybe Ralph Edwards Jr. If we could dig him up, maybe he could interview me for something. Yeah. I'm always interested in talking about myself, but conversations with Tony Mobley, go there. You can find an hour-long one already.
All right. Well, anyway, so thank you for asking. Let's move on to the next topic.
Douglas Carmichael, moving from the HDMI world to the SDI world and what you need to know, synchronizing all the inputs to a common time base, etc.
Oliver?
Why not move to NDI or, video IP when you edit?
Okay. I missed a note here, and I apologize to you all. And somebody in the back end was suggesting that if I stopped on time, they would fix everything else on the back end. So we're actually running a couple of minutes over, and I apologize to you for that. We will take care of everything else at another time. Thank you all for participating in this. It has been so cool to get your ideas. And hopefully we will see many of these topics in the show in the coming first quarter. Great job, panel, as always. This is impossible without an absolutely august panel. And we certainly had this today. Oliver, it's great to see you too. Haven't seen you in a long time. So it's great to have you back on the panel. And everybody else, to all of you in the producers core, those of you who are watching the show who had these great suggestions for today. Thank you so very, very much. This show is driven by you, and without your suggestions, it's nothing. So we appreciate that. And of course, we were never going to forget our back end people, the people behind the scenes who you will see on the credit roll that's coming up here momentarily. They are the heart and soul of a big part of what we do. Don't forget, tomorrow we continue with brainstorming, but this time media infrastructure, all the support that makes production possible. So logistics, power, infrastructure, crews, that kind of stuff. Saturday, we're brainstorming education. So for those of you who are involved in the education topics, come for that. And Alex even says we're going to brainstorm introspection. So that'll be an interesting philosophical discussion next Saturday. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. See you next time, which is tomorrow or in after hours.
And we should send Bill 811 million bananas.
What, 89,649 miles for the Tlaloc traversal? Why can't I say that?
We can do a second hour on drifting sync.
I'm going to find my blow dryer and take it outside to my connections and see if I can dry everything off in the hopes that I don't have this delay problem anymore.
I don't think that's your problem. I think it's inside the house. Look out, man.
It's inside the house. Oh, no. Here. Slash your cliches for 100, Alex. Bye, everybody.